The bond forged. 15 years earlier, on the remote research outpost of Proxima 9, a young woman named Vex Harlow stood before what would change her life forever. At 22, fresh from the academy with a degree in geological survey, she'd expected to spend her career cataloging rock samples on distant moons. Instead, she found herself staring at Professor Callista Thorne, the galaxy's leading expert on draconic species. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake," Vex said, clutching her assignment papers with trembling hands. "I applied for the geological survey team. I don't know anything about dragons." Professor Thorne, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and the perpetually distracted air of someone whose mind operated on several levels simultaneously, barely looked up from the incubation chamber she was adjusting. "No mistake," she replied, fine-tuning a dial with careful precision. "Your aptitude tests showed exceptional empathic potential. Very rare in humans. Exactly what we need for this particular subject." "But I've never even seen a dragon outside of Holovids," Vex protested. The very idea terrified her. Dragons were dangerous, unpredictable creatures from the old worlds. What was she supposed to do with one? Professor Thorne finally looked up, fixing Vex with piercing gray eyes. "None of us have seen a shadow scale outside of historical records for nearly 2 centuries. They were thought extinct until this clutch was discovered. 5 eggs, and only 1 viable. The last of its kind, possibly." Vex approached the incubation chamber cautiously. Inside, a single egg rested on a bed of synthetic sand, its surface a swirling pattern of blue and silver that seemed to shift in the light. It was smaller than she'd expected, about the size of her head, but somehow it radiated an otherworldly presence. "It's beautiful," she admitted despite herself. "Cerulean Shadow Scales were the librarians of dragonkind," Professor Thorne said, reverence creeping into her voice. "They stored the collective knowledge of their species, passed down through genetic memory. The most empathic of all draconic breeds. They formed bonds with selected humans. Soul binders, they were called in the ancient texts." The egg shuddered slightly, a hairline crack appearing across its surface. "It's hatching," Professor Thorne whispered, stepping back. "And it needs to imprint on you immediately. The first moments are crucial for the neural bond to form." "Wait, what?" Vex backed away. "You can't be serious. I'm not qualified for this. I don't even like pets." Professor Thorne's expression hardened. "This isn't a pet, Miss Harlow. This is possibly the last Cerulean Shadow Scale in existence. An invaluable repository of knowledge that could revolutionize our understanding of pre-collapse civilization. And for whatever reason, your brain chemistry is compatible with the bonding process." The egg rocked more violently now, cracks spreading across its surface like a spider's web. "But I didn't sign up for this," Vex protested. "A bond for how long?" "Life," Professor Thorne replied simply. "Once formed, the neural link is permanent. Breaking it would cause immense psychic trauma to both you and the hatchling. Possibly death." Before Vex could formulate a response, the egg split open with a sound like breaking crystal. A small, wet head emerged, scales glistening in the incubation chamber's light. The creature, Vex couldn't think of it as a dragon yet, it was too small, too vulnerable, blinked huge iridescent eyes and fixed its gaze directly on her. Something shifted in Vex's mind. A presence, feather-light but unmistakable, brushed against her consciousness. Curious. Questioning. Innocent. "Pick it up," Professor Thorne urged, her voice suddenly gentle. "Let it scent you." As if in a trance, Vex reached into the incubation chamber and lifted the hatchling. It was surprisingly light, its scales warm and soft against her palms. It made a chirping sound, almost like a question, and the presence in her mind strengthened. "Hello," Vex whispered, surprised to find tears in her eyes. "I'm Vex." The hatchling chirped again, and somehow, impossibly, she understood. Not words exactly, but a feeling. A greeting. Recognition. Belonging. He says hello back, she said, wonder replacing apprehension. He's hungry and cold. Professor Thorne's clinical demeanor gave way to a rare smile. The bond is forming. Excellent. We'll get him fed and set up proper environmental controls. She made a note on her data pad. What will you call him? The hatchling's scales caught the light, sending prismatic reflections dancing across Vex's face. One word formed in her mind, placed there not by her own thoughts but by the small creature in her hands. Glint, she said with certainty. His name is Glint. Years of understanding. Over the following years, Vex and Glint became inseparable. What had started as an accidental assignment became the most meaningful relationship of her life. Glint grew from a chirping hatchling into a magnificent creature, his cerulean scales shimmering with an inner light that seemed to reflect his emotions. At full size, he stood nearly 8 feet tall, with a wingspan that could span their entire research lab. But unlike the fierce dragons of legend, Glint was gentle. His empathic abilities made him incredibly sensitive to the emotions of others. He could sense distress from miles away and often comforted injured wildlife that wandered near their outpost. His greatest joy seemed to come from learning, absorbing information with an insatiable curiosity that impressed even Professor Thorne. Their bond deepened beyond anything the research team had expected. Vex could feel Glint's emotions as clearly as her own, and he seemed to understand her thoughts before she voiced them. During long nights in the lab, she would find ancient memories flowing from his mind to hers, visions of a time when shadow scales soared through crystal cities, serving as living libraries for a civilization that had vanished millennia ago. The connection you two share is unprecedented, Professor Thorne told Vex one evening as they watched Glint carefully sorting through archaeological artifacts with delicate precision. Most bonded pairs can sense each other's general emotional state. You two share actual thoughts, memories, even dreams. It was true. Vex had grown accustomed to waking with fragments of Glint's ancestral memories playing in her mind. Images of great libraries built into mountain sides, where shadow scales had preserved the knowledge of 1,000 worlds. But there was something else, something they discovered during a solar storm 3 years after Glint hatched. The electromagnetic interference from the storm had overwhelmed their equipment, and in that moment of crisis, something extraordinary happened. As Vex reached out to comfort a distressed Glint, their minds synchronized completely. For a brief, terrifying moment, she felt power flow through her, ancient, dormant abilities that belonged to dragonkind, channeling through their bond in ways that defied conventional understanding. They never spoke of it to the research team. Some instinct warned them to keep this secret, sensing that such power in the wrong hands could be catastrophic. Their peaceful existence on Proxima 9 lasted 12 more years. 12 years of quiet research, of growing closer, of Glint becoming not just her bonded companion but her dearest friend. He was the gentlest creature she'd ever known, harming nothing larger than the occasional rodent that invaded their supplies. Then the slavers came. Vex was returning from a routine geological survey when she saw the smoke. Their outpost, their home, was burning. Bodies of her colleagues littered the ground around the complex. Professor Thorne lay motionless near the main lab, her life's work scattered in the wind. Glint! Vex screamed, running toward the burning buildings. She found signs of a struggle, scorch marks from stun weapons, and drag marks leading to where a ship had landed. Her bonded companion, her other half, was gone. In his place was only a crushing silence where their connection should have been, blocked by neural dampeners that felt like ice in her mind. The slavers had left evidence of their identity, ship registration traces leading back to the Galactic Coliseum. Commander Skreel's fighting pits, where exotic creatures were forced to battle for the entertainment of the wealthy. Vex had spent 3 days tracking them, using every resource she could steal, borrow, or buy. 3 days of following the trail while feeling Glint's muffled distress through their severed link. 3 days of planning an infiltration that would either reunite them or get them both killed. But she would not abandon him. After 15 years together, she would rather die than leave Glint to face the arena alone. The infiltration. The Galactic Coliseum loomed before Vex like a monument to cruelty. 40 levels of gleaming metal and transparent steel, home to the most brutal entertainment in 3-star systems. She crouched in the maintenance tunnels beneath the arena, the stolen technician's badge still sticky with blood on her jumpsuit. The man hadn't given it up willingly, but she'd done what was necessary. 3 days of surveillance had given her the guard rotations, the maintenance schedules, and most importantly, the location of the holding pens. Glint was somewhere in this labyrinth of suffering, and she could feel him getting closer. The neural dampeners couldn't completely sever their bond. 15 years of connection had forged something too deep to break entirely. She checked her chronometer. 28 seconds until the next security sweep. Vex pressed herself deeper into the shadows as a guard's boots echoed past her hiding spot. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to remain still. Getting caught now would doom them both. The guard's footsteps faded, and she moved. The maintenance corridors weren't designed for someone of her height, but desperation had made her an excellent contortionist. She crawled through spaces barely wide enough for her shoulders, following the route she'd memorized from stolen schematics. A distant roar echoed through the metal walls, making her heart clench. She'd know his voice anywhere, the particular resonance of his distress call that had been etched into her consciousness since he'd hatched in her arms. "I'm coming," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her through the dampeners. The announcement system crackled overhead, "Attention valued patrons. In 15 minutes, witness the Battle of the Millennium, the undefeated champion of the 7th Galaxy Circuit, Commander Scale, against his latest acquisition, the rare Cerulean Shadow Scale." Vex's teeth clenched until her jaw ached. Shadow Scales weren't fighting dragons. They were scholars, empaths, the librarians of draconic knowledge. Glint had never harmed anything larger than a pest that invaded their research supplies. She reached a service door and pulled out the stolen badge. The pad beeped green, and the door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. The holding pen stretched before her, a long corridor of reinforced cells where creatures from across the galaxies awaited their turn in the arena. Some paced nervously, others sat in eerie stillness. None belonged here. "I know you're upset, darling, but the ratings were absolutely dreadful last week." The voice was smooth, artificially modulated to sound pleasant while delivering unpleasant news. Vex pressed herself against the wall, peering around the corner. A tall figure in an expensive crimson exosuit was gesturing emphatically at a hovering camera drone. His skin was deep red, offset by ornate platinum armor that gleamed under the harsh lighting. Commander Scale, owner of the Galactic Coliseum and self-proclaimed most dangerous being in 3 systems. The audiences expect blood, spectacle. Not some overgrown lizard cowering in the corner, he continued, addressing someone out of Vex's view. "Do you have any idea how much I paid for that creature? 26 million credits. Highway robbery. And now it refuses to fight." "With respect, Commander," a nervous voice replied, "Shadow Scales aren't combat dragons. They're empathic. This one appears to be suffering from separation anxiety. Our scans indicate it had a neural bond with its previous handler." "Previous handler?" Screel's laugh was like glass breaking. "You mean the research girl? The one that killed 3 of my best acquisition specialists before they stunned her?" Vex's hand unconsciously moved to the stunner scar on her neck, still tender after 6 weeks. "Yes, sir. According to the reports, they were inseparable for 15 years. These bonds." "I don't care about bonds," Screel interrupted. "I care about return on investment. Find a way to make it fight, or I'll have its genetic material harvested and sell the rest for parts." Vex bit her lip until she tasted blood. She had to get to Glint before they forced him into the arena. Their connection had always been unusual, even among bonded pairs. The research team had spent years studying how Glint's empathic abilities amplified through their link, how his ancestral memories flowed into her dreams. But there was something else. Something they'd discovered during that solar storm 3 years ago, something they'd kept secret from everyone. When their minds fully synchronized under stress, Glint's dormant abilities awakened, channeling through Vex in ways that defied conventional understanding of dragon physiology. A klaxon sounded, followed by the mechanical whir of the holding pen doors beginning to open. "Begin the loading sequence," Skriel commanded. "And double the guard on the central arena access. I don't want any complications today. The Galactic Governor himself is attending." Vex retreated deeper into the shadows, mind racing. The central access was her most direct route to Glint, but now it would be heavily guarded. She needed another way in. The maintenance schematics flashed in her memory. There was a secondary route through the waste processing system. Disgusting, potentially deadly due to toxic runoff from various alien species, but unguarded. "Hang on, Glint," she whispered into the darkness. "Just a little longer." Into the arena. The waste channels were every bit as horrific as Vex had anticipated. She gagged as she waded through ankle-deep sludge of indeterminate origin, the reprocessed excretions of 100 different species creating a miasma that burned her nostrils and made her eyes water. Her stolen jumpsuit was now stained with patterns she refused to examine too closely. But as she got closer to the arena, something wonderful happened. The neural dampener's effect was weakening. She could feel Glint's fear more clearly now, a cold knot in her stomach that wasn't her own. 15 years of shared consciousness had blurred the lines between them until sometimes she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. The sound of the crowd grew louder as she crawled through the final access pipe. 11,000 voices merged into a single, hungry roar that resonated through the metal around her. She reached a grate that looked out onto the sandy floor of the arena from behind one of the massive decorative skull sculptures that dotted the perimeter. "The most dangerous predator from the outer rings," the announcer's voice boomed. "The Crimson Destroyer. The undefeated champion of 37 consecutive death matches, Commander Skriel." Vex could see him now, resplendent in his combat armor, a curved blade in one hand that gleamed with unnatural light. The crowd's adoration washed over him as he raised his arms, soaking in their worship with practiced ease. "And his challenger," the announcer continued, voice dropping to a dramatic whisper that somehow carried throughout the massive space, "a beast so rare it was thought to be merely legend, the last of the Cerulean Shadow Scales, with scales that can cut through durasteel and venom that liquefies organs in seconds." Vex almost laughed bitterly. Glint had never liquefied anything except his own dinner, and his scales were about as dangerous as silk. A massive gate rumbled open on the opposite side of the arena, and her heart broke. Glint emerged slowly, the neural dampener around his neck like a cruel collar. He was magnificent even in his distress, 8 feet of graceful power, his cerulean scales dulled by captivity but still beautiful. His great head swept the arena, and for a moment, their eyes met across the distance. Even through the dampener, she felt his recognition, his desperate hope. "Vex?" The thought whispered across their damaged link, so faint she almost missed it. "I'm here," she projected back with all her strength. "I'm coming." Skriel approached Glint with predatory confidence, his blade humming with energy. The crowd screamed for blood, but Glint simply sat down in the sand, his intelligent eyes never leaving his approaching opponent. He wouldn't fight. He couldn't. It wasn't in his nature. "Come on, you overgrown lizard." Skriel taunted, making a few practice swipes with his weapon. "Give them a show." But Glint just looked at him sadly, and Vex felt her bonded companion's confusion and hurt. He didn't understand why these people wanted him to cause pain. Skriel's face darkened. "Fine. If you won't fight, I'll give them a slow execution instead." He raised his blade. That's when Vex acted. She kicked out the grate and dropped into the arena, rolling to her feet in the sand. The crowd's roar shifted to confusion as this small human woman in a filthy jumpsuit sprinted across the arena floor toward the dragon. "Stop," she shouted. "He's not a fighter. He's a scholar." Security guards poured from the gates, but Vex had already reached Glint. She threw her arms around his great neck, and the moment they touched, everything changed. The neural dampener had weakened their bond but couldn't break it entirely. Now, with physical contact re-establishing their connection, 15 years of shared consciousness slammed back into place. But more than that, the stress of the situation, the mortal danger they both faced, triggered something deeper. Just like during the solar storm 3 years ago, their minds synchronized completely. Ancient power, dormant in Glint's genetics, awakened and flowed through their bond. Vex gasped as she felt her awareness expand, felt power that belonged to a civilization lost to time channeling through her human form. The neural dampener around Glint's neck sparked and shattered. Screel, who had been approaching with his weapon raised, suddenly stopped. The predatory confidence drained from his face as he found himself staring not just at a dragon and his bonded companion, but at something far more dangerous. Glint's scales began to glow with inner light, and when he spoke, his voice resonated not just in the arena but in the minds of every person present. "We are the last of the shadow scales," his mental voice was vast, ancient, carrying the weight of millennia. "We were the keepers of knowledge, the guardians of wisdom. We have never sought violence, but we will not allow ourselves to be destroyed for entertainment." The awakening. The arena fell into stunned silence. 11,000 voices, which moments before had been screaming for blood, were now struck dumb by the ancient power radiating from the dragon and his bonded companion. Vex felt the change washing through her, not just the restoration of their neural link, but something far deeper and more profound. Through Glint's ancestral memories, she understood what was happening. The shadow scales had not been mere animals. They had been partners to the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known, serving as living repositories of knowledge and wisdom. When that civilization fell, the dragons had carried their legacy forward, waiting for a time when their gifts might be needed again. That time was now. Commander Screel raised his energy weapon, but his hand was shaking. "Whatever trick this is," he snarled, "it won't save you. Guards! Kill them both." The security forces opened fire, but the energy beam struck an invisible barrier inches from Vex and Glint. The ancient power flowing through their bond had awakened abilities that had lain dormant for millennia, not just empathy, but the ability to manipulate energy itself, to shield and protect. "We offer you a choice," Glint's mental voice resonated through the arena, reaching every mind present. "Release us and end this barbaric practice, or face the consequences of your cruelty." "Never!" Screel screamed, activating his armor's combat systems. Jets of flame erupted from his suit as he launched himself at them. But Vex and Glint moved as one entity now, their consciousness fully merged. She could feel his strength, his grace, his ancient wisdom, while he channeled his power through her human intuition and adaptability. They sidestepped Screel's attack with fluid precision, and Vex raised her hand. Light erupted from her palm, not the harsh artificial glare of technology, but the warm, golden radiance of stars themselves. It struck Screel's armor and sent him crashing into the arena wall, his weapon systems overloading and shutting down. The crowd began to panic, some fleeing for the exits while others sat transfixed by what they were witnessing. But Vex and Glint weren't interested in revenge. Their shared consciousness was focused on something far more important. "We sense others," Glint spoke, his mental voice gentler now. "Creatures held against their will, forced to fight for your entertainment. We offer them freedom." All around the arena, the holding pens began to open. Not through mechanical failure, but through the same energy manipulation that had shattered the neural dampener. Creatures that had been trapped, tortured, and forced to kill emerged blinking into the arena light. But instead of the chaos Screel expected, something beautiful happened. The freed creatures looked to Glint and Vex, and through their expanded consciousness, the pair offered something that had been denied them for so long: understanding, empathy, and choice. One by one, the creatures simply walked away. Some headed for the exits, others for the launch bays where transport ships waited. They took nothing but their freedom, seeking only to return home or find new lives among the stars. Commander Screel, his armor smoking and powerless, struggled to his feet. "You can't do this," he shouted. "I own them. I paid for them. Vex looked at him with eyes that now held the wisdom of ages. "No one owns anyone," she said simply. "That's the lesson your civilization needs to learn." She turned to address the crowd, her voice somehow carrying to every corner of the massive arena without amplification. "We came here for rescue, but we found something more important. A chance to remind you who you used to be. Your ancestors partnered with beings like us to build something beautiful. You can choose to build again, or you can choose to destroy. The choice is yours." With that, she and Glint simply walked away. The crowd parted before them like water, and no one dared to stop them. The ancient power that flowed through their bond made it clear that they could defend themselves if necessary, but more than that, their presence inspired something that had been long forgotten: wonder, respect, and hope. As they boarded a transport ship at the spaceport, no one questioned their right to take it. Vex felt their connection settling into something new and wonderful. Not just the bond they'd shared for 15 years, but something deeper. They had become a bridge between species, a living reminder of what partnership could accomplish. "Where do we go now?" Vex asked as they lifted off from the Coliseum, leaving the chaos of their liberation behind. Glint's mental voice was warm with contentment and purpose. "Home, first. To rebuild what was destroyed. And then, wherever we're needed. The galaxy has forgotten how to listen to itself. Perhaps it's time we reminded them." As their ship jumped to hyperspace, the last Cerulean Shadow Scale and his bonded companion disappeared into the vastness of space, carrying with them the hope of restoration and the promise of a better future. Behind them, the Galactic Coliseum stood empty for the first time in decades, its silent corridors a testament to the power of compassion over cruelty, and the unbreakable bond between two souls who had found in each other something worth fighting for. The end.